Singh, your podcast host, and I'd like to welcome you to the My Brand HQ podcast, all things personal branding for career acceleration. This podcast is for talented, ambitious career professionals like you who are wanting to be perceived as a thought leader, to be top of mind to those that matter, and to make an impact and stand out, be that in your team, your organization, or your industry, and to be inspired by other successful leaders. I will be interviewing high-achieving career professionals who have carved out a successful career in their field and are open to sharing their career journey, their challenges, their learnings and insights with you, someone who is looking to establish your personal brand and accelerate your career. Through my personal branding and coaching practice, I enable career professionals primarily in the technology industry to earn more money, to increase their salary. In fact, I spoke to all of my past clients that I've worked with over several years and learned that actually overall, they've received an average of 47% increase in their package. Wouldn't that be a great place to be? They've also all achieved at least one, if not more, promotions or moved on to a higher level in their career at another organization. And they're looking to advance their career while showing up as the best version of themselves. If this sounds like you, then do reach out to me and let's have a chat. And why do I do this? Well, during my corporate career spanning 25 years, I quickly realized that hard work alone was not enough to get me to where I wanted to be and the success that I strive for. And my belief is that hard work, coupled with creating and establishing a strong personal brand, can both influence and accelerate your career and get you to where you want to be. In today's episode, I am speaking with Paniz Gorji. Paniz is a public sector client executive with Microsoft in Canada. Prior to joining Microsoft, she held a variety of sales and business development roles within some of the largest corporations across North America, including Oracle, ADP, and Xerox. Her passions include supporting organizations' transformation through adoption of technology and helping leaders build a more inclusive workplace by bridging the gender gap. She is currently co-managing Dr. Roberta Bondar's STEM Career Development Program with Women in Communication and Technology. Paniz is a content creator and is an active member of LinkedIn. Outside of work, she focuses on her family and friends and enjoys the outdoor life in the Greater Toronto area with her dog. In today's episode, Paniz talks about the impact of surrounding yourself with a strong network, why she takes a stand for herself and for others, about being the change and not waiting or following others, knowing who you are and showing up authentically, always. What makes us is not what happens to us, it's what we learn from it, and why hiring a coach is one of the best investments she ever made. So let's head over and hear what Paniz has to say. Paniz, hi there, and welcome to My Brand HQ. How are you doing today?
I'm doing excellent, Leila. How are you doing?
I am very well, thank you for asking, and it's great to have you with us today. So I wanted to dive straight into the questions because I know we've got lots to talk about. So let's start by having you share your challenges and how you overcame them in your early years. Can you tell me a little bit more about those?
Sure. Maybe I'll start with my journey a little bit for your audience as well, so that they know what my background is and where I came from. So I'm originally born and raised in Iran, moved to Canada in 2005 for school. And then from there, I got my higher education, and then I started working. Originally, I started with Xerox, and then I made my way into tech. I'm currently working with Microsoft. And as part of that, some of the early challenges that I had to highlight really is that English is not my first language. Moving from a country where Farsi is my first language, and the culture and the social norms are a little bit different. Getting adjusted to that in Canada was a bit challenging for me. And considering that I moved by myself at the age of 19, I had to, I didn't have the support that I needed at a time from a parental perspective, obviously, as well as didn't have a network of people who could be there to support me. So I sort of built that from ground up, and it was challenging because as simple as getting a cold and not having somebody to take care of you, it gets very hard, and you get to grow up very quickly, in my opinion. And in addition to that was, there are a lot of discussions around career development and how you find your first job out of school. Well, I didn't have the benefit of having a network, so I had to build that network, and I started going to these career fairs that you get to share your resume. And I was very fortunate that somebody took a bet on me and they hired me at Xerox, but I also recognize that a lot of people are not privileged enough to come across individuals who will take a chance on them and give them an opportunity. So I would highlight those as some of my early challenges.
Fantastic. And there's a lot going on there. So tell me, what was it you did really to because you talked about your network and building out your network. What else did you do to overcome them? Because I'm assuming in some way it impacted you and might have held you back, possibly.
I would say yes. I still made the best of it as I possibly could have, right? Like I built a community, and I lived in Halifax, which is a smaller city in the eastern part of Canada. And we tend to, so it's 95% Canadian and 5% immigrants, right? So at the time, at least that I moved, it has grown since, but it was that they say, if you can see it, you can be it, right? I couldn't see it, right? There wasn't a lot of people like me who were immigrants and didn't have the ability to or didn't have access to the network. So for me, I went two directions, obviously. One was building my immediate community, which hunting for people that look more like me, and their names maybe stood out and they weren't your typical names that you come across. And then at school, I started building my network with individuals there, right? Like, because it was important for me to have a good network in my education side as well. As I got out of the education system, then it was building my network from there, which I think we're going to get a little bit into this, but it was building my brand and showing up as my authentic self and being the person who I am, regardless of whether it's at school, whether it's my workplace, whether it's in my community, whatever that case might be. And that's how I really built my community that way. And I've been doing that a little bit now in my existing role as well. So I do, I'm a seller for Microsoft, working with municipalities, police services, and government agencies. But what I notice is that I have the ability to, tap a little bit into the social frameworks also, and support some of the people that work and have challenges out there. And that's how I started my LinkedIn profile and build my brand on LinkedIn. So, well, I'll leave that for our next discussions, but that would be some of the ways that I started building my community.
Fantastic. And it's great that you kind of recognized that at a young age, kind of because you had to, the importance of having those people around you, right? Building the community, building a network, and how it would benefit you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So tell me, what was your initial experience as you joined the world of tech?
It was a bit challenging because there's a lot of, it's a very male dominated industry to begin with, but I'm not really I've been exposed to that in my education life also, because I did engineering, and I sometimes joke about it, which is not really funny, but when we started our program, it was me and two other women in a classroom of 250 people. So we certainly were the minority, and I when I was at my previous company, I also noticed that where a lot of my peers didn't look like me. A lot of the people that I reported to didn't look like me. And I'm fortunate working in a company that they recognize the importance of diversity, inclusion, and belonging, because I think the first two mean nothing without the third one, where you actually feel like you belong, your opinion matters. And it was very challenging for me when I first started in tech, and I had to continue to prove myself. It wasn't sort of they say give the person the benefit of the doubt. It certainly wasn't like that. It was more of a hey, you earn it. Even though I worked really hard to be at that company, I went through the proper process of the hiring process. I got interviews with multiple people. So you would have assumed that at the time that I joined the company, I sort of had that check mark that, hey, this person is credible to be in this role. But nonetheless, I still had to prove myself. And they were very difficult conversations where I had to have with the leadership also, that it didn't sit right with me at a time. And being in the role that I am in now, I feel completely different because I see a lot of people like me, even in management. My VP, for example, is a female, right? So again, it goes back to my comment of if you see it, you can be it. And it's nice to see that those individuals exist, but certainly wasn't short of challenges, both from any new job has its own learning curves that you need to from a technical perspective or from a skilling perspective, whatever it might be, right? And having these extra stress factors on top of that, it never makes it easy. And then it goes back to that diversity and inclusion piece also, so that you don't, it's sort of, you come in, if I'm put against or I'm next to somebody else who doesn't look like me, then we bring the same value. It's sort of a given, but anyhow, those were some of my challenges that I faced.
And so when you talk there about having to, going through a raft of interviews and then still feeling like you had to continually prove yourself, was that the exception rather than the rule? So that was an exception for some people rather than an expectation across the board?
It's hard for me to say what other people experience not being in their shoes, but I feel that if you go through that entire process where you get quote unquote qualified for a position, then it shouldn't be a need for you to have to redo that entire process. It's like, I'm certainly in favor of, you need to prove yourself in the role that you're in by, I'm a seller, for example, I carry quota. If I don't perform in my role and I don't meet my quota, yes, it's questionable. But if I carry my quota and I prove that I'm credible, and yet I still get questioned for how I show up, or because I'm younger and I'm a female, I might not have the experience that they're looking for. And then there is that little piece of the pay equity piece that also comes into it, which I think that we need a better pay equity from a female versus male. However, I don't have to prove myself to say, hey, I'm qualified for this role, rather than I'm filling a DNI, component. So that's what I mean by saying I felt like I had to continue to prove myself, even though the numbers and my performance and everything else add up to show, those are the facts, to show that I'm credible. I still felt that I still had to show up a little differently to gain the respect.
Right. Interesting to hear that. And I know, it's prevalent across a number of organizations. And I think we're slowly seeing a shift, but not everywhere, unfortunately. And before I go on to the next question, I just wanted to pick up on something else you said there about diversity and inclusion. And you said it doesn't really work without having the belonging. So tell me a little bit about that. How can whether it's leaders or whether it's organizations create that sense of belonging?
Yeah. So I'll use a bit of a longer answer for that, and I'll tell you why in a minute. So I'm extremely passionate about helping leaders close that gender gap in STEM specifically, right? Maybe because it resonates with me a little bit more. Because I feel that a lot of, and I work with a lot of younger women in the early stages of their career who are, PhD grads in engineering or in science or in math, you name it. And they get into the workforce because they're fitting a D&I component. They show up and they don't enjoy what they do because the workplace and the work environment is not set up in a way where they feel included and they don't feel that they belong. And what happens is it's not just about hiring, it's also about retaining these people in STEM, in technology, in science. And if we don't create an environment where women feel and non-binary people don't feel they have a voice, and it's one thing to have a voice, it's another thing to get heard. Your voice gets heard, right? If we don't create environments where women feel like they belong, they leave.
Yeah.
And if they leave, then, and I was sharing these stats in the past where over the past, in 1970, there was 28% female representation in STEM. In 2021, there is 38%. So decades worth of work, and we're only up by 10%. And I joked and I said, hey, if there was a company that was in, around for 40 years and their profit only went up by 10%, would you call that company successful? Probably not. It probably will go bankrupt, right? And the reason for these stats is that there is not enough representation of women and non-binary people in STEM holding these jobs because they kind of get pushed out because that belonging and that inclusion doesn't exist. So that's what I mean by there's diversity. You can hire many people of, many races, many colors, many religions, many backgrounds, whatever the case may be. But if they constantly feel excluded, that inclusion doesn't exist and they don't feel like belong and they can't collaborate. And we all know that teamwork, increases the efficiency and effectiveness of whatever you're doing. But if we are not feeling that belonging, then the D&I means nothing.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And I think it's important to recognize that, again, we hear a lot of that now, that companies talk about diversity, but the inclusion piece, the belonging piece isn't there to support people. And you talked about retention, which is even for an organization, it's very costly to have to rehire. So retention makes more sense. And the little things that you can do and put in place to keep the people there rather than having to go out and hire again is significant.
Absolutely.
So tell me, in all of your experiences you had, which are diverse through your early years, what was your biggest lesson, would you say?
My biggest lesson is to always show up as who you are, right? Because, authenticity is one of the most important things for me. Because being in a seller role, I am an external representation of the company who I present. And I have the privilege of building relationship with my customers. And being in tech, it's a very small world. There are, if you like working in corporations, there are a handful of corporations that are, the top of the line technology corporations. And then if you were representing one company versus another one and you move, your customer end up being the same people sometimes, right? So it's so important to show up as your true self and who you are. And I think that's what worked in my advantage over the years, where I am who I am, and this is how I show up. I have values that I represent, and I work for companies that align with those values, because I think that's another thing that's important. I always say, if I can't sell a product I don't believe in, because I'm not that type of person. So it's important to make sure that you represent an organization that aligns with your personal values. And it sort of goes into that purpose where, I think you and I chatted a little bit in the past about this piece, about the purpose. And I say there was a little bit of a dilemma for me, for example, where I thought, okay, is it better if we understand our purpose in our 20s? Or is it better, it works in our advantage if we understand our purpose in our 30s? And for me, at least in my 20s, my mindset was very different, right? It was about finding another job that pays more, and working for this company that their brand is recognized, and blah blah blah. And you soon get to realize life is more than, like, I'm not talking about meeting the bare minimum, like everybody needs the Maslow's hierarchy. But what I mean is, you get to a point in life where you need to have a purpose. You need to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And for me, it was, for me to hit that purpose, the component that really took me to that was knowing who I am, my self-awareness, showing up authentically to really pursue that purpose that I have.
Yeah, I love that. I love what you said there. And, I think it's something that is becoming more and more talked about now, is to really know who you are, to understand yourself, to then be able to understand what is your purpose. But as you say, well, first of all, it can evolve over time. You talked about 20s and 30s, but actually get into your 40s, that purpose could change, and so on. So it's tuning in and actually listening to yourself and hearing, okay, what is it that really lights me up? What is it that fills me with passion? And I can see when you talk about what you do, you are passionate about it. And I want to bring you back to what you said at the start of that question around customers moving with us, because I'm a huge believer in that. And when I embarked on this journey, started talking about personal branding, that was an example that I'd referenced regularly. Is, as you said, you could work from the biggest organized global organizations to the smallest, but at the end of the day, yes, that's a brand that you work for, but you are your own brand, and people deal with people, and they'll remember you as the individual. I think it's Maya Angelou quote, isn't it? As people remember how you make them feel. So they'll remember how you make them feel. And if you have a good relationship, particularly sales, which is so, so important, they will follow you. If they need to buy, they'll be picking up the phone to you before they're picking up the phone to the company that you worked for.
Absolutely.
That will be the first port of call. And whether you can help them or not is then a discussion to be had. But it's the relationships, and that's whether, as you talked about, community and networking is so, so important. And another thing just to mention here as well is this is Zig Ziglar quote. He talks about everyone is in sales. So it doesn't have to be just about you being in a sales role. Whatever we do, whether you work in a back office role, in HR, in finance, in a techie role, or in a client-facing sales role, we're all in sales because we have those internal or external customers, and you want to build those strong relationships with them, which means you want to show up as your best self, understand yourself, be authentic, and people will remember you for that. And people want to work with you, they'll want to hire you, or they'll want to buy from you.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. And we all interview for roles, and that's where we sell ourselves in a very short period of time to people who absolutely have no idea about who we are, right? Yeah. So I 100% agree with that. And some people say fake it until you make it. I don't believe in that. I believe in show up as your true self, because people read through, when you're pretending to be somebody you're not, people easily will read through it. So it's always important to be authentic, in my opinion. And I agree with you 100%. We are all selling, even in our relationships, we're selling our values to our partner and to, our friends and all that. So 100% agree with what you said.
Yeah, and I agree with you there on fake it till you make it. I think, you're then becoming incongruent in how you show up, and people will sense it. They may not sense exactly what's going on, but they'll sense something isn't right, and that will impact the trust and the relationship that we're trying to build. So showing up as your true authentic self and working on those things that maybe you've not quite refined or nailed yet is okay. It's okay not to know the answer to everything, but being authentic and honest about it will take you a lot further forward. So tell me then, how did you begin to make your voice known?
So I think a portion of that really goes back to my childhood. I was never shy of expressing how I felt or what I believed in. However you want to, some people say, when you're a child and you get your voice heard, they think that you're a troublemaker. In my opinion, it was very important for me to stand up for what I believed in, and what was important to me. And I continue to do that today. And a portion of that really grew up with me, right? And I think that it's important to acknowledge that I brought up in an environment where my parents allowed me to take a stand for myself and to express myself. So I think that's where it really all started. And when I felt that somebody, their voices didn't get heard because maybe their voices weren't louder than the others. And I don't mean by volume, but by, you sit at a room in a conference room and somebody tries to express themselves and they quickly get shut down, right? So for me, that's not okay. And I will call that out where I say, hey, so-and-so had their hand up, or so-and-so had a comment to make. And that's another way that I show up, where I not only let my own voice to get heard, but I also create an environment for other people's voices to get heard. And I would say, for example, so I have a podcast called Voices with Paniz, where for me it was creating a platform where other people can show up and tell their story and the journey that they went through and get their voices heard, because to me it's extremely important. And I believe that you can either be the change, or you can wait for somebody else to do that, and you just, you can either follow it or not. That's your choice. But if you see something that doesn't sit right with you, be that voice and express it, because it's important. It goes back to your true values and your integrity and what you believe in. So that's what I would say about that.
Yeah. And I agree wholeheartedly. And I think, as you say, it's for those who can to make a stand for others and to call it out when other people are being shut down from speaking, from making their voice heard, so that people recognize actually it's not okay to do that.
100%.
So tell me, first of all, we've talked prior to this, and you shared some experiences with me. So how have you handled being knocked down in your professional life?
I took a pause and I reflected, and it wasn't that easy at first. Obviously, I felt all of those emotions, I lost belief in myself. I felt that maybe I wasn't good enough. And it wasn't easy. Like, I think it's important for people to understand that life goes through ups and downs, right? It's not always the highs that make us, it's the lows that really make us. And I had those lows. I got laid off and I was carrying a mortgage and I was supporting my family, and not having enough savings was a lot of stress for me, for example, where I felt, hey, how am I going to deal with this? And am I not good enough, right? So I really had to rebuild myself in terms of, hey, Paniz, this is a good reminder. You came from Iran as a 19-year-old and you made a life for yourself in Canada where you had zero support. And if you could do that, you can do anything. And it was a good reminder for me. And it wasn't easy. Like I said, it didn't just come to me. I had to go through those emotions. It's like sort of like a grief thing, right? Where you go through it, you understand it, but don't let that hold you down. Remember who you are and what you're capable of, and get up and stand up and fight for what you believe in. And that could be as simple as, hey, I know who I am and I know how capable I am. And I know that this is just the circumstances. It is not a reflection of me failing, but rather it could be the failure of the organization also, right? There's a lot of components, and I'm not really getting into that because that is a whole conversation of its own, but it's more of a believing in who you are and what you're capable of, and not letting the outside noise to really knock you down. And it gets easier the more it happens. I think that duration where you grieve and you doubt yourself and then you get back up just gets shorter and shorter and shorter, to a point that when it happens for the 70th time, you just get up, shake yourself, and move on. So I think that's really what happened for me, to just get back from all those moments where I got knocked down.
Yeah. And I think, again, in what you've explained there, it's important to recognize we all get knocked down. It's what we do with that and how we deal with it and our response. And yes, as you use the word grieving and, the self-doubt it might create for us, yes, that's okay. However, you want to be aware of the fact that, yeah, we can grieve for a period of time and feel sorry for ourselves and feel that being knocked down. But ultimately, what do you then do with that? Do you get up and go for it again, or do something differently, or learn from that? And that's the biggest takeaway from being knocked down.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really good point, and that's the learning of it, right? Learning and not focusing so much on the failure itself, but what I learned from this, because it happens no matter, it's not just in your career, but it also in your personal life, it happens. And it's all of those learning so that you don't make the same mistakes all over again. So 100% agree with you.
Yeah, completely. And so you talked about understanding who you are. So can you share a little bit about that in terms of how you've developed that self-awareness, let's say, of understanding who you are? Was it just over time? Was it personal development? Was it, just introspection? How did you get to that point?
So it was a little bit of everything. I'm huge in self-help books. I used to read a lot of novels when I was a kid, and then when I reached adulthood, I had a huge focus on really learning who I am, and being okay with who I am. As part of that, I got to learn a lot of, I listen to podcasts and I read a lot to really understand some of the factors of why we show up, how we show up. What does it really mean? And in addition to that, last year in August, I was in a very low moment of my life where I think with COVID, a lot of people went through that experience where, you know, you felt maybe not your greatest and you felt a bit down. And I certainly went through that, in addition to some other stuff that happened both personally and professionally, where I started self-doubting and not having that confidence, despite all the books that I read and all the things that I listen to. It was just a moment in my life where I felt maybe I'm on the wrong path, right? I even thought about quitting my job and starting something completely different. And what I've done is invest in myself by hiring a career coach. And I think it's extremely important, because you think about all these athletes and they have coaches that, you know, they might be the best at what they do, but they still need some guidance, right? And I think those are extremely important. People talk, for example, to psychologists, for example, if they're going through a hard time, because they help them get out of that, right? And for me, it was the best investment I've made in myself, to hire a career coach. And what she helped me was to shift my mindset. And I think that worked truly in my advantage, because when you're in the moment where you think things are not going right, or you have some self-doubt, is all of those negative things that enters your mind. And I think we're our worst self-critics. And, you know, a lot of people, for example, tell me, hey, Paniz, you're amazing and you're doing all of this work and blah, blah, blah. But when I'm alone with my own voices in my head, all of those self-doubts come in and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not doing enough, or maybe I could do more, and things like that. And it was so important for me to work with this individual who called me out at the times that I was giving excuses, right? When I had, and I'm pretty good in terms of being consistent and committed, but there are times where you are like, okay, is this even worth it? Right? And having that person who, and it's not just giving you the answers, but rather asking you the right questions where you come to your own conclusions as why you're doing what you're doing. And so I would say it's a combination of, and it's a really long answer, but I want it to be understood that it's not just one thing, and you need to continue to work on yourself. You continue to evolve and learn, and a portion of that also is for me to look at what other people have done, right? Like, not in terms of, hey, they're doing better than me, but rather what have they accomplished and what challenges they overcame to be where they are and to become who they are, that were also important for my self-development and my growth.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, and that's very, very insightful, and thank you for being so open as well. And it's so true what you say. You know, of course, I'm an advocate to having a coach, but I've always had a coach myself for the last 9-10 years now. And as you rightly say, you know, no matter how good you are, you can always up level that, you know, 1%, let's say, and having that person to challenge you and to have you look at things in a different way is incredibly powerful. And it's not a case of you have to have a load of problems to come to a coach with. It's just simply about your perspective on the world. And sometimes we don't see things because we're in it. Like, you were in a situation, we've all been in situations, and they become bigger than us, and we struggle. But actually having that coach who can ask those powerful questions and help us to get out of that situation that more often than not we've created by the thinking that we have or the beliefs that we hold, it is, you know, life-changing. And I also love the fact that you said there about evolving and learning and growing. It's an ongoing process in life. So yeah, great to hear, you know, you're constantly investing in yourself and, you know, in that personal development journey, because it's a great place and it's an exciting place to be. and you also mentioned about, seeing what other people are doing. For me, what came to mind, as you said, that was the inspiration. It's not about comparison and thinking, well, they've done this and how comes they've done that and I haven't. It's actually, if they can do it, so can I. It's seeing what people are doing and thinking, wow, I'd love to be able to do that, and being inspired and motivated to go create that for yourself.
Absolutely. I think that you hit the nail on the head where you said inspiration, and that's the word that I didn't really refer to, but that's exactly what I meant. And I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek, and what he talks about is healthy rivals, right? These are your rivals, not in terms of, hey, I'm comparing myself to that individual, but getting inspired by what they have accomplished, so that I believe in myself and knowing that I can do the same thing. So 100% agree.
Yeah. And that's part of the purpose of this podcast. Is to have people like yourself come and talk and show other people what is possible, whether it's challenges you've overcome or, what's inspired you, what your vision is. It's to show people that actually there is a huge world out there and anything is possible. So it's great that you're sharing your story with us today. And you touched earlier on personal branding. So tell me a little bit more about that. How do you define that? And how important is it for you?
So from a personal brand perspective, I know that there are a lot of people who talk about personal branding, right? And I think that it's the same as, if you go and shop for something, if you know the brand, you're more lenient to purchase that, whatever it might be, rather than an unknown brand that you don't know what they represent, or if the quality is even good, right? And I think the same applies to companies and to people, because their brand and how you show up is important, and you need to have a consistent brand. It's not your Paniz shows up as this version of herself at work, and then shows up online on LinkedIn as this other version of herself, right? That is not a consistent brand. And to be able to build your brand, I believe, at least for me, it was understanding who I am, what my values are, what my mission is, what my goal is in life, and what my purpose is, right? It goes back to that knowing your why and tying your what and your how to your why from a personal brand perspective. And I've done a lot of work, and I thank my coach for that, because she really guided me through it. But it is important how you show up every day and how you build that brand, and to be consistent with your brand, because having a consistent brand over time build that trust with people. And those people could be your colleagues, could be your family, could be your customers, could be anybody. You might not even know them, but they know you. And that's really important, because if sometimes this has happened to me in the past, where I started. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, and obviously I'm sharing inspirational videos and things like that, because it's important for me. It was important to share my story, because if the impact was important to me, if the customers that I serve and I get on a call, bring that up to me and say, hey, Paniz, you are making an impact out there. Thank you for showing up as how you are. Thank you for inspiring people. And that was never my goal, to inspire it wasn't a mean to an end for me, where I, inspire my customer necessarily. It was very nice that it worked that way, but it is that consistent brand is so important, and having a personal brand is important, in my opinion.
Yeah. And yeah, I agree with everything you said there, and particularly the consistency piece is important, because as you say, if we don't have that consistency, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start to lose trust from people. And it's not just in the workplace, it's your social circle, your family. So And personal brand for me is your reputation. So it's what people are saying about you and how you make them feel. And it's all of those things that we don't necessarily have in our awareness, but we naturally have almost a brand identification for people, although we're not consciously thinking about it. But if someone said, could you describe that person? You're talking about their brand, right? And you want it to be in a positive way because it is your reputation.
That's so true. So true.
So share with me, Paniz, about the program, the CEO program that you're involved in and what got you involved in that.
So SheEO is a very interesting program. It started years ago by Vicky, and I'm only an activator in that group. But what they do is they get activators basically, and they these activators put their own money in, because as you know, a lot of people, especially women, when they want to start their own business, for example, the funding are less, the processes are lengthier, the trust in them accomplishing what they can is a little bit less. And what Vicky has done is recognizing that gap across the world. And I don't think it's in Canada or the US or UK or Australia or wherever it may be, right? I think it's unfortunately a global challenge that we have, where it's harder for women to get the funding that they require. So think about it as like a crowdfunding type of approach where people put in their own money to fund other women achieve their dreams. And what happens is there are ventures that come and present themselves saying that this is what I've done. And there is this woman who, for example, had her child has skin problems. And for years and years, she went and saw doctors and nobody could cure the problem. And she ended up creating, she's an indigenous woman, and she ended up creating this cream that cured her child. And then she took that cream and sold it to all the other women on the network that she had who had similar problems. It may have not been the exact same problem as her child, but similar problems. And then she built her community. And from there, you can now buy this product on it's on the shelves at stores. But the SheEO program allowed her to get access to funding and the networking that she required to exponentially grow her business that otherwise wouldn't be available to her. And then, so I followed this for about 5 years because I was invited to this, to some of their events through some of the other activators. And because it sits right with me and my values and my purpose, I wanted to be part of it so that I can highlight and contribute to the success of these women. And, you know, we all would someday when I might be in their shoes where I need the support that they're getting from others as part of this program, and I could be that person. And the beauty of it, and this is the part that I absolutely love, is everybody comes to the table with one ask. And I'm getting goosebumps even telling you the story. At their last event, which was it was before COVID and it was in person, there's a room of thousands of women. And you get to the stage to have one ask. And people, so for example, my ask, and this is just hypothetically, is that, hey, I came up with this product and I don't know people at the drug marts that I need to have access to. And there are people in the crowd who put their hand up saying that, hey, I know somebody at this location. And this other person says, oh, I know a pharmacist who's looking for this. And it's beautiful how they all come together. And, you know, it's about having that ask and helping, but it can't go, you need both, right? Like, it's wonderful that people want to help, But it's important to also ask, because if I only help you and you never felt like you can contribute to me, that relationship is not really a strong relationship. The strong relationship is I show up for you and you show up for me, and reciprocal. And that's the bond that gets created. And I believe that and like putting the financial support aspect of it aside, that's the part that really important, where you have one ask and you can give back to your community, and it applies to everybody. So that's why I got involved, because it's a beautiful thing that she's doing, and it's global now, right? It show that it being global shows how much gap there is out there.
Yeah.
That people are standing up and supporting this venture that she has created years ago.
That sounds incredible. And I can imagine, or only imagine, being in a room like that, because the energy in that room would be just phenomenal.
It certainly was. And I can't wait for more events like that where we can be in person, because we get that energy in the room. We all feed off of each other's energy, right? And it was so beautiful to see it. And they do similar things online, but I always think that being present in that space is always completely different experience.
And it's beautiful as well, because it's all about the law of reciprocity, isn't it? Because even if you can maybe help one person and somebody else can then help you, but it's all within that same community, and you just don't know. I think sometimes people feel, well, I should only help someone if there's something they can offer me. But actually, the law of reciprocity doesn't matter. If you just put your hand out and help others in some way, whether it is financially or an introduction, recommendation, it'll come back to you in some way, in some shape or form, even if it's not from that person.
Yeah, I do believe in karma too.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. So tell me, what is next for you, Paniz?
I started this year, obviously with the work that I did last year, it was a lot of helping other people. And I was thinking about what would be my word for this year, and that is impact. And it's important for me, impact has many shapes and forms, right? My impact could be somebody seeing my video on LinkedIn and get inspired and go do something. Or it could be a reminder that, hey, you need self-care and you need to take care of yourself, and otherwise you won't be able to help others and take care of others, right? And at my job, it's the same thing. I love what I do because I can create impact with the organizations that I support. So what's next for me is to create more impact this year, to be more present. And the thing that I started this year, for example, was hosting those podcasts, so that other people can also get inspired, similar to the work that you're doing, that they can get inspired by somebody like yourself, me, or anybody else. And knowing that if she's done it, I can do it too. So I want to create more impact this year. And one of the things that I'm doing is the power of gratitude, right? Like every day that I get up, I write down what I'm grateful for. And I started it this year, and I've been consistent with it. And I think it's important for us to create a world of love and gratitude. And I want to expand that. And that would be something I want to accomplish this year, and keep growing it as the years that come.
Amazing. That sounds beautiful. And you talked about the power of gratitude, and I'm again a huge believer in, the more we recognize what we have and are grateful for, the more we will attract that into our world.
Yeah, for sure. My coach even said, you don't operate from a place of scarcity, operate from a place of abundance. And abundance comes from being grateful for what we have, and not focusing on the things that we don't have. So it's being resourceful in doubling down on what you have and knowing what your strengths are. In our education system, unfortunately, and from where I grew up, it was a lot of, hey, know what your weaknesses are and turn them into strengths. And as part of the self-awareness that I have developed over the years, for me, is know your strengths and double down on your strengths, because that's the abundance piece. That's being grateful for who you are and what you have at your disposal. I don't have to be like the person next to me. They're great as they are, and I'm great as who I am. And it's just doubling down on what I'm given, the skills that I have, the superpowers that I have, and really making that even bigger and bigger and more impactful. So, it's so important. I never realized the importance of the power of gratitude until over the past 6 months, I would say.
Wow, incredible. I love that. I love that as a story. And yeah, you're certainly making an impact out there in the world with everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking some time out to talk with me, Paniz. It's been truly inspirational and insightful, and I love everything you talked about today. I think we're wholly in agreement when it comes to having your voice heard, personal branding, authenticity. They're all things that align with my values as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Leila, for having me and inviting me to your podcast. I'm grateful for that and hope your audience enjoyed the video as well.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please do subscribe to the show so you don't miss any future episodes. And remember to leave a review telling us about your key learnings and what you enjoyed the most. And do share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can spread the word on the importance of personal branding when it comes to your career advancement. And also ensure that others can benefit from these invaluable insights from many inspirational leaders. I will be eternally grateful. And if you are looking to earn more money, to get promoted, to secure your next role and advance your career, and would like me to support you personally on that journey to get you there, then reach out to me and let's arrange a chat. Alternatively, why don't you check out my personal branding launchpad, a group training and mentoring program. Finally, if you'd like to connect with me directly, then do reach out and direct message me on LinkedIn. You can find the link as well as any other resources mentioned in the show notes. I'll see you next time.